Alright, today's video is all about how I think Nordic hamstring curls have probably caused more hamstring tears than they've prevented, and then a little bit about how I structure my hammy training to not tear a hammy as a 32-year-old sprinter. And then as far as the workout, I've just done my first max velocity session for the week. On my max velocity days, that's when I come straight in to thrash my hammies, because that gives me the greatest chance of making full recovery before I need them for another max velocity or high speed running session. But before I train biceps femoris, I got to hit biceps brachii and the triceps as well, because the other thing I've been trying to find opportunities for is hitting my arms first thing in the workout, or first thing when I'm in the weight section at least. Because again, a lot of people have been disputing this idea that you can bring up lagging body parts by just adding volume. I'm not 100% sure that that's not possible, but again, a lot of people saying if volume's not the driver of hypertrophy, maybe it's just about doing the sets earlier in the workout, because again, with arms, for a lot of people, arms, calves, abs, these tend to be a lot of lagging muscle groups on people that are also classically trained towards the end of the workout. So I have 2 workouts a week that I start off with my arms and then I blast the hammies at the end of them, get a good rest in before my next running session. If you had to sum up my hamstring tear prevention protocol, that's basically it. Just stack your days where you're blasting your hammies, consolidate your stresses a little bit so there's ample time for recovery before the next exposure. So a bit of context, about 4 or 5 years ago, people really started to get excited about the idea of Nordic hamstring curls. It's been a really good way to prevent hamstring tears, especially preventing them from occurring during high-speed running. Hamstring tears, for the people who aren't aware, are probably one of the biggest injury dramas for any athlete that does a lot of high-speed running. So whether that's a field or court sport athlete, a very common injury for sprinters as well. Depending on what you consider common, when you tally up all the injuries that sort of occur in those sports and the non-contact ones, hammy is sort of one of the more frequent ones that are occurring. And since then, I think that there's been a lot of really productive discourse about, one, what the actual mechanism of injury prevention may be with Nordic hamstring curls, whether they actually prevent hamstring injury at all. And shout out to Franco Impellizzeri for this one as well, just reminding people what the definition of prevention really is in a medical context. It depends what people mean when they say injury prevention. I think a lot of less scientifically minded people, when they think injury prevention, they think, you're never gonna, it's akin to bulletproofing injury prevention. Whereas under the medical definition of it, it just means having any sort of preventative effect. Even if there's like a 20% reduction in hamstring strains, let's say, again, you would say that Nordic hamstring curls are preventative. It doesn't mean that they have to prevent it 100% of the time for it to be considered preventative. And like I said, this whole conversation was happening alongside the whole emergence of the whole bulletproofing movement, so you can see how those wires got crossed a little bit in the public discourse about it. We should probably also talk about what a Nordic hamstring curl really is, and especially the way you're meant to be doing it if you're trying to gain these supposed injury prevention effects, because there was this proposed mechanism of why the Nordic hamstring curl was so effective, and a lot of it was to do with the changes in like muscle physiology or architecture from doing a supramaximal eccentric, so a form of eccentric overload. So again, we'll see a lot of people, their goal is to be able to perform the concentric of a Nordic curl, and that's sort of their sign of competence. And again, I understand that when you're just looking at a Nordic hamstring curl in isolation, but it's like, if you can perform the concentric successfully, it's highly unlikely that the eccentric portion of the Nordic that you just performed was genuinely giving you any eccentric overload. And the idea is that if you can create this eccentric overload, you increase the fascicle length of the muscle, which I think helps improve its stiffness in theory. And yeah, it was sort of a lot of the discussion around the proposed mechanism of injury prevention that really got me thinking about like what the injury prevention effect or mechanism of Nordics really is, because I don't know, from a lot of the discussion around what people thought they were doing, it sort of just seemed like they're just trying to make people more resilient to overstriding and the mechanics that emerge as you get more fatigued when you're trying to run at fast pace. And like, you guys already know that my lens for everything is load management. And just when I sit here and think about what I think could cause a lot of hamstring strains, I just can't get around this idea of players being pushed into highly competitive scenarios under fatigue. And yeah, I just think trying to run really fast while you're under fatigue, it's really hard to work around that in competitive sport, but that probably is, when you adopt a common sense or load management view of things, sort of makes the most sense that like that would be the main cause of hamstring tears. So then started hearing all these stories about people actually tearing hammies because they started doing a bunch of Nordic hamstring curls. And yeah, that made sense because sprinting is really tough on the hammies and Nordics are very tough on the hammies. So, you know, when you're ramping up your high speed running and then you're like, oh, better do some injury prevention. And then you throw in Nordics on top of that. I mean, if someone asked me, Angus, how do I tear a hamstring? I'd be like, do a lot of high speed running and do a lot of super maximal eccentrics for your hammies, and like, you probably tear one. It doesn't matter how much you want to get into the weeds on like, oh my God, but look at what we did to the fascicle length. It's like load management, total stress on the fucking system, that's king, okay? Load management, that's your central lens for problem solving, for explaining why things went the way they went. And then there's this other crowd, they'll say things like, you know, managing your dose of high speed running. That's the biggest key when it comes to hamstring injury prevention. And there's some people that just can't fucking handle uncertainty because even with that approach, like managing your running dose, you're gonna get it wrong occasionally because load management, we're not in control of all the factors and it's more of an art than it is a science. It's an art underpinned by scientific principles. And so a lot of people just freak out when they get a hamstring tear and they're like, no, I thought I had the running dose right. Oh, I've got to change everything. I've got to add in some injury prevention work. It's like, you can't take every error in the system or every fuck up as a data point. Some of it's just noise as well. I'm not saying if you're getting a lot of hammy tears, you should probably look at it as signal, not noise, but if you're just getting a couple of injuries here and there, it's like, that's fucking life. You can't prevent everything. And so with this being in mind, like Nordic hamstring curls are probably effective for hamstring injury prevention in high speed running because they just put a fuck ton of force through your hammy. You know what puts even more force through your hammy? Actually fucking sprinting. I'm really curious for someone to explain to me what you're gaining from Nordic hammy curls that you can't get from just managing your dose of high speed running. This isn't to say that you shouldn't train your hamstrings at all because, you know, I'm a believer in strength training and strength and conditioning as a whole, but yeah, as far as like adding stress to the system to try and prevent injuries that are likely happening due to an overload in the system just doesn't make sense to me. And this isn't to say that you shouldn't be doing your Nordic hamstring curls, because again, great hammy exercise, but you should think about it in the greater context of like your total training plan and just lining it up with your high speed running so you're not just constantly thrashing your hamstrings every single session. You've got to find a way to consolidate some of those stresses. Again, that's what I do. That's why, actually I'll do one more, I'll crank my biceps one more time and then I'll explain my thought process to how I landed at my hamstring injury prevention protocol. And so just sort of talking about the body of evidence, like, you know, there was this meta-analysis that everyone was really loving. That was sort of in favor of Nordics for hamstring injury prevention in high-speed running. But then when Franco Impellizzeri reviewed it, he didn't really like the way that they analysed the statistics, and he wasn't happy with some of the studies that they chose to omit from the data set, or from the total set of studies that they looked at in the meta-analysis. The meta-analysis, I think, was also conducted by a guy who sold Nord boards. I'll look into that, but yeah, Jared Powell, shout out to Shoulder Physio. He actually has a debate between Franco Impellizzeri and the Nord board salesman that did the meta-analysis, so go listen to that for yourself. So yeah, lost a lot of faith in that guy and that whole meta-analysis and its findings. But then Jump Science, shout out to Daniel Back, friend of the show. He talks about this paper where they had a bunch of athletes that suffered hamstring strains and then they just had this sort of general eccentric overload protocol that they followed. And in all of the athletes, I believe there was 40 of them that continued with the protocol. They checked in with them 12 to 18 months after the injury had occurred and just looked for reincidence of hamstring strains or hamstring tears, and no one who completed the eccentric overload protocol retore their hamstring. Again, I'm not sure what their running volumes were like. I don't know if they were in season or out of season, but again, that's some promising data. And like, sort of what I'm taking from the data is that thrashing your hammies is the thing that's going to give you resilient hammies. Thrashing your hammies is also the thing that's going to help you tear a hammy. I mean, it seems like trying to build a really strong back. Like, you got to do really stressful things to it, but then not break your back, or like, you know, trying to avoid that. And yeah, I just think we're playing the same game with the hammies. So anyway, I'm like, all right, well, how do I increase thrashing my hammies? But then I'm also going from, you know, 1 to 2 sessions, sometimes 0 sessions of high speed running a week. Been a bit inconsistent with my sprint training over the last couple of months, but I also do have pretty weak hamstrings and I'd like to get them stronger. So my solution to increasing the amount of high-speed running I'm doing and increasing the amount of hammy thrashing I'm doing in the gym simultaneously is just to do it on the same day. So sprinting's my main priority, so I do that in the morning, and that's the thing that's thrashing my hammies the most. And then a couple of hours later, I come in, I thrash my hammies again, after I've thrashed my arms, of course. And then I've got at least 48 hours before my next bout of high-speed running, and that's the biggest space I can create. Therefore, I think that's the smartest protocol. So yeah, I'm still thrashing my hammies. I'm still maintaining this perspective that, you know, total work distributed throughout the cycle is key. That's the main variable we're sort of playing with. I'm leaving space to recover. I'm indulging in some eccentric overload. So if that whole fascicle lengthening thing, if there's any merit to that, I'm still getting that. But yeah, just from all the evidence and the anecdotal evidence that I've seen, Nordic hamstring curls, it's just another hammy exercise. Again, it's a great exercise. It's S-A tier, as the science-based people would put it, but so fucking seated hamstring curls, Romanian deadlifts, and you can employ aspects of eccentric overload in all of those as well. I'll show you how I do it on the hamstring curl in a second. If you like the way I talk about training in these videos, you'll probably love the GPP Level 1 course, where I just go over all the principles that underpin my decision-making process and how we get great results here at General Physical Preparation. So check out the notes in the description and you'll find a link to that. But yeah, we got pre-recorded lectures on absolutely every part of training. And then there's also weekly Zoom calls with me. There's a Discord where you can ask me and Jacob any questions that are on your mind. And you can interact with the rest of the GPP community and coaches as well. Just been taking my hinges a little bit easier lately as well, because trying to push my squats, trying to do a bit more sprinting, still got my plyos in the program. There's always a lot of volume going through the hips, and I just thought I could clean up my hinge form a little bit. So taking this opportunity, keep the hinge work just a little bit lighter and just really trying to keep the back out of it, because I've got a big old strong back, and try to make my ass and hamstrings take as much of it as possible. This isn't the hamstring tear secret methodology yet. Wait, it's coming up after this. This is where I squeeze in my 1 to 2 sets of hard hinging per week. All right, so this is my special sauce for hamstring injury prevention. Again, not really load management's the main thing. We're just sort of trying to get some eccentric overload here. So, and how we do that is, I find that if you don't have any training partners, you can just do the 2 legs on the way up and then 1 leg on the way down. But I'm just getting some partner assisted overload on the eccentric. So I curl it up and I've got like a pretty solid weight on there. And then my training partner's just gonna pull it down on me. So I get like a nice forced 3-second eccentric while I'm resisting as hard as possible. And that's my sort of bastardized Nordic eccentric overload protocol.
Good, harder. Thank you, that's it. 3 more of those. Oh. Thank you, 1 more. Oh.
Can I get 1 more set of those?
Oh. 2 more. Oh, fuck yeah.
Oh, mate. This is better than Nordic ever could be.
Yeah. That's it.